my dear followers, friends, viewers, or welcome if it's the first time that you are watching my YouTube channel, my Paranormal and Mystery TV. I warn you since now. This time, in few minutes, I'm going to show you, I'm not kidding, real horrific videos and documents that really could disturb the sensitivity of the viewers. And I warn you since now because also what I'm going to tell you right now, the themes could disturb the sensitivity of the viewers. Real killer clown, known as Pogo the Clown, and then rebaptized killer clown after having discovered his countless horrifying murders. I'm talking about John Wayne Gacy, one of the most sadistic monsters of history. He murdered in a horrific, sadistic way more than 33 kids, young boys. But it's almost for sure, according to many investigators, that the victims have been more than 33, 39. And it cannot be ruled out that he could have killed even 100 kids, young men. Because according to the secret tapes in which there are conversations of John Wayne Gacy with his attorney, that only now, thanks to the son of Gacy's attorney, and because of Gacy has been condemned to death penalty, and he was executed on May the 10th, 1994, via lethal injection, may be released. He kidnapped, raped, brutalized, tortured at least 33, 38 kids, young guys. And murdered. When he murdered them after hours of agony, he buried their corpses in his cellar, in the basement of his house, using concrete, cement. And he himself admitted to have thrown at least 5 corpses of young men as his last victim, Robert Piest, down a river. During the years of detention in prison, he showed no remorse towards the victims. He was pure evil. And his last words before dying via lethal injection was, "Kiss my ass!" Wayne Gacy. Think about that John Wayne Gacy was born in Chicago on March the 17th, 1942. The second born of John Stanley Gacy and Marion Elaine Robinson. He had a very difficult childhood and adolescence because he was overweight and he tried to hide his homosexual tendencies. His father was a great bad person. He was an alcoholic, he was very violent, and he bullied him and beat him so tough. He beat both him and his mother, and he used tough psychological and physical violence, extreme violence. But when he was 18, he got interested in politics and he became assistant of the candidate for the Democratic Party. In his quarter, on March 1964, after being graduate in economics and business, he started to work as director of a shoe store in Springfield, and he started to date Marilyn Myers. After 9 months of engagement, they got married on September 1964. The father of his wife was a rich businessman, owner of several restaurants and fast foods. In the same year, he had his first homosexual experience with a friend who was consenting. In 1966, his father-in-law offered him the chance to direct 3 restaurants, fast food of his own. Kentucky Fried Chicken in Waterloo, Iowa. So he moved with his wife in Waterloo. He worked incessantly and he became a very great businessman. He collaborated on many charity projects, becoming a prominent figure in the community. He was well seen by everybody, and he was the classic model citizen. Gacy and his wife Marilyn had 2 children, Michael and Christine. Apparently, he was a model citizen, married with 2 children. And he started to lure very young boys for sex. Even boys, even kids, young boys who were 14, 15, 16 years old. Many of them were his employees. sexual encounters. But then, what happened? What made him become one of the most sadistic, fierciest, dangerous serial killer of history? A monster of remorseless cruelty? What happened? What happened? Let's watch the videos. Warning! Some images could disturb the sensitivity of the viewers.
He is one of the most infamous and prolific serial killers America has ever known.
He had told us that he killed 33 people.
His methodology is heinous.
He was luring young boys into his basement and raping, torturing, and then killing them.
And his alter ego, infamous.
He visited children's hospitals dressed as clown.
Stephen King's book It featured a killer clown, but that was just fiction. John Wayne Gacy was a killer clown, and it was all too real. Behind the grease paint smile was a lust for murder.
He taunts police on his trail.
Hey, you wanna know a secret? Clowns can get away with murder.
Until authorities finally unearth a horrifying discovery.
I think this whole crawl space is full of kids. There was more than one victim here, but we had no idea it was going to be 33.
The killer reveals disturbing details to the detectives on the case.
During the confession, we had found out that not only did he torture his victims, but after he killed his victims, he would stick their underwear down their throat.
And new theories suggest that the body count might be higher than originally believed.
There may be other angles out there that are unresolved.
Meet John Wayne Gacy.
Hey there!
Be careful, these are true images, be prepared.
Bodies were found underneath John Wayne Gacy's home. The media was on the scene to report every grisly detail.
And that was the headlines for every day is second, third body, eighth body.
Things took an even stranger turn when it was revealed that the man behind the murders would frequently dress as a clown and entertain children.
John Wayne Gacy is part of the reason why many people have coulrophobia.
This is John Wayne Gacy, Pogo the Clown, then rebaptized Killer Clown, one of the most sadistic serial killer of history. This is his story and murders.
Will forever be known as one of the most infamous serial killers in history. But what shaped this man into a monster whose deeds still horrify people today?
Other news and images of his cellar with so many ditches. Real extreme horror. Watch.
John Wayne Gacy, a sadistic serial killer that fooled even his closest friends and neighbors.
This is a hard-driving, very hard-working individual. I was astounded.
A pillar of society with a shocking secret.
We took a screwdriver into a little crack in the floor, and when we did, the whole floor lifted up.
He would become one of the most prolific serial killers in American history.
They asked him, well, why did you do this stuff? I was afraid they would expose me. He said they were all just human trash anyway.
But was John Wayne Gacy a product of his upbringing, or was he born to kill?
John Wayne Gacy.
Gacy was born in Chicago in 1942, the only son of Marion and John Gacy Sr.
John Gacy was a son of a blue-collar worker, a mother who was a pharmacist. His biological father drank alcohol, but continued to work. He was considered a functioning alcoholic.
From what I understand, he was physically abused by his father, and his father was often not available or was intoxicated. His father was also known for abusing Gacy's mother. In fact, engaging in physical fights with her that Gacy must have witnessed. Now, clearly those sorts of things have an impact on a person's development and the way they look at the world.
The young John was close to his mother, but to his father, the overweight, unathletic boy was a disappointment, one that he made little effort to hide.
His father would come home, he would go down into the basement, into his workshop, not interact with anyone in the family, but had this special thing about his son, whom he felt should be better, more like the father, become a business person, become someone who was admired in the community.
Gacy's father regularly called him stupid, a mama's boy, and a sissy.
His father frequently told him that he was a failure, he wouldn't amount to anything. So again, you think of how someone growing up with that kind of verbal abuse and emotional...
But then he grew up, and in September...
In 1964, Gacy met and married his co-worker Marlin Myers. Marlin's father saw promise in his ambitious new son-in-law and appointed him the manager of his 3 fast food franchises in Iowa. John and Marlin began a new life in Waterloo. Together they had 2 children. Gacy was now a family man, a rising star in the local business world, and a popular member of the community. On the surface, it was a storybook existence.
Gacy appears
to be a normal family man, but he has hidden desires.
When Gacy worked at the KFC, he had access to a huge pool of potential victims.
Gacy whets his sexual appetite by preying on innocent young men he hires for odd jobs. 15-year-old Donald Voorhees, the son of a prominent local politician, is one of those boys.
Because, of course, only 15 years old.
Gacy then treating him probably more like an adult than anyone in Donald's life was treating him. At the same time, Gacy's introducing him to alcohol and probably hard liquor, and then you throw on top of it Gacy offering him $50 to perform oral sex. $50 in 1970 would have seemed like a fortune.
By 1968, John Wayne Gacy has begun luring young boys into his home and paying them in return for sexual favors.
One of Gacy's young victims was named Donald Voorhees, and he came from a very influential family.
In March 1968, Donald comes clean to his father, an Iowa senator, when Gacy's name is mentioned.
So, how is it working for John Gacy?
Fine, I guess.
He wants me to be his campaign manager, but I'm kind of on the fence.
Dad, I really don't think that that's a good idea.
Why?
Voorhees felt uncomfortable enough that he confessed to his father what Gacy had been doing to him. Donald and his father then went to the police, and they arrested Gacy for sodomy.
Gacy takes 2 polygraph tests and says that he hasn't engaged in homosexual activity. The polygraph results show otherwise. Gacy is arrested and charged with sodomy. He is sentenced to 10 years in prison in Anamosa State Penitentiary. Gacy's world is crumbling as his wife, Marlin, threatens to leave him.
I'm not agreeing to a divorce.
Gacy reportedly never sees his wife or children again. In prison,
Gacy was really good in prison. He also became a great chef.
In prison, he was evaluated by a prison psychologist, and that psychologist said he most likely would not be committing any further antisocial acts in the future. So because of the recommendation of the psychologist, Gacy was released early, 2 years out of the 10-year prison sentence. He only served 2 years.
On June 18, 1970, John Wayne Gacy is released from prison after serving less than 2 years. He moves back to Chicago, and in with his mother, he joins the local chapter of the JCs.
When Gacy returned to Chicago, he started a construction company called PDM, and his primary employment source were boys between the ages of, say, 14 and 25.
While Carol is out, Gacy's insatiable lust for teenage boys takes a grisly turn.
John went to the bus station looking for a hookup. There, he met Timothy Jack McCoy, who was coming home from Christmas vacation.
Gacy and McCoy spend the night together. The next morning, while McCoy is making breakfast, Gacy sees a knife in his hand and perceives it to be a threat.
What are you doing? God! God! No! Please stop bleeding!
So
he stabbed him to death. And he said blood was everywhere. He didn't realize how much blood could come out of a person. And he said at the time his wife was out for the day, so he had thrown the body in a crawl space real quick, and he went back and he started to clean up all the blood. And he said it took literally an hour to clean up all the blood. And he said he just had wiped up the last drop of blood when his wife walked in the front door.
Hi, girls. How are you? Oh, it's so good to see you.
Did you just clean the kitchen?
I sure did.
So sweet.
I'm glad you're home. Oh, it's good to see you.
It's good to see you.
All right, I'm gonna go play with those girls. All right, girls, coming to get ya.
Carol has no clue that John has just committed a murder. The couple marries in July 1972.
By Mary
Clown.
Gacy regularly entertained his neighbors by dressing up as a clown and performing magic tricks.
Gacy was the kind of person that, not knowing how evil he was, you would like to have him in your community. He was active in the JCs, which is the Junior Chamber of Commerce, and he was a volunteer for the political party of his choice, and he was very well thought of in a very small world.
Real images these are.
In 1974, Gacy established his own painting, decorating and construction business, hiring a string of young men to carry out the work. His charisma and bravado ensured there was no shortage of potential employees.
The boys knew John Wayne Gacy. He was a big name in town. And when he walked in, he was John. He had the big car outside. He had the money. Everybody knew he was wealthy. He had a big business. And when he approached boys that were 14, 15, 16 years old, making minimum wage, and he was promising them almost double salary just to work in a construction site and help him build. These boys jumped at the chance.
Gacy's upstanding image as generous neighbor, successful businessman, and do-gooder in the community meant his motives for employing many of the young men went undiscovered.
I find it very interesting that
Gacy started to become a top figure in his community.
Of the community. So here's somebody living out the fantasy of normality, albeit all the time we know he's also a closet homosexual who's engaging in sodomy with young men that he's able to convince to engage in sexual activity with him, perhaps through the status that he had buying those sexual services.
By the mid-70s, behind closed doors, Gacy's wife began complaining of his violent mood swings. He'd lost interest in marital sex and was keeping homosexual pornography around the house. She divorced him and moved out. Gacy began actively cruising Chicago's city streets, looking to pick up young men from gay districts, known pickup spots, and areas where waifs and strays would congregate.
Gacy was able to actually use one of his roles, that of a pseudo-police officer. he had the wherewithal in terms of, you know, a radio, and he would often hide behind a badge and have, you know, bits of what looked like police paraphernalia.
He would pick them up here, cruising the streets in a car that had a very large light on it, as the police often did, and he would be able to stop people using that as if he were a police officer, picking up strays, taking them home, torturing them.
In 1975, boys began disappearing. Some had been selling sex on the streets, some were young runaways, some were connected with his construction business. Would frequently be drugged, handcuffed, subjected to repeated rapes and terrifying ordeals of torture. Then they would be strangled.
He always picked the kind of attractive guy that he could never be himself. But these individuals became less individualistic as far as he's concerned. They became more and more objects. I mean, the more they became simply objects for him to do with as he wished, the more horrific and torturous their experience was within his company.
Gacy seems to me...
In 1977, his twisted ruse pays off.
Hey there, hey! Can I see some ID? Get in the car, blow your head off. Stay calm, just stay calm.
He fakes to be a policeman to lure his victims.
Shut up! Just shut up.
Robert Donnelly is taken to Gacy's home, where he is raped and tortured.
Gacy's torture of Robert Donnelly is indicative of a sadistic serial killer. He would dunk his head in water numerous times to the point where he would almost drown.
Gacy was pure evil, and this kid thought he was going to die.
Gacy was really pure evil.
This kid thought he was going to die.
And eventually he just dumps Robert Donnelly somewhere and, you know, he wakes up.
He then gets the courage, decides to report it to the police.
Donnelly reports the assault, and Gacy is questioned by police. He admits to having what he calls slave sex with Donnelly, but he insists it was consensual. The police believe him, and no charges are filed. Little do the authorities know about the makeshift tomb in Gacy's crawlspace.
Many of
1978, he again concedes to his drive for destruction. Gacy goes on the hunt and finds Jeffrey Rignall. The killer lures him into his car with marijuana.
Appreciate it, buddy. Sure. Gacy put a chloroform rag over Jeffrey's mouth until he passed out. When he woke up, Jeffrey was in Gacy's house.
In between assaults, Jeffrey Rignall comes to and notices another man in the room. This strange mystery will resurface decades later.
Rignall's report, corroborated by the police, was that after he was horribly and viciously raped by Gacy and chloroformed, he finds himself awake but disoriented and dumped in Lincoln Park. To his extraordinary credit, spends 3 days essentially waiting.
Rignall spots Gacy's car, and he follows it to Gacy's home.
From there, he gets the license plate and reports it to the police, and the police issue a warrant.
Gacy is arrested and charged with battery. He is released on bail, and a trial date is set. In the meantime, Gacy begins working for the Democratic Party as a precinct captain, where he coordinates events for the community and even meets First Lady Rosalind Carter.
Here was a guy who was active in his community. He even had his picture taken with First Lady Rosalind Carter. No one knew that he had a double life that included murder.
The interesting thing about the picture of him with Rosalind Carter is that he had his Secret Service pin on his lapel. That pin enabled him to get close to the president, which he shouldn't have been able to get because he was a convicted felon.
He's living this lie out in the open.
On December 11th, 1978, John Wayne Gacy meets with the owners of Nissan Pharmacy in a Chicago suburb to discuss construction work.
Gacy went into the pharmacy and gave the owners a bid, and that's where he saw Rob Piest.
This was the real Robert Piest, a very great, handsome young guy, and Gacy invites him at his home to offer him a job. So Rob goes to Gacy's home to hear these jobs offering.
Took the report and then they got onto it right away and immediately got the opinion that this kid was a good kid and everything going
But
for him.
then
So
it disappears.
The police pull up Gacy's arrest records based on his past history of sexual violence. They go to question him.
Where's the clown? Hi, how you doing?
We'd like some help about a missing juvenile that was last seen at the pharmacy you were at last night.
Oh yeah, I was down at the pharmacy for some work. I've seen a couple boys, but that's it. I had to leave and get down there to the hospital where my dying uncle was, and I didn't make it in time. He passed away.
But since you were one of the last people to see Rob Piest alive, I'm gonna need you to come down to the station and fill out a witness form.
I can't go down there. I got stuff to do. I'll come by later. I'll come by there.
He took Rob Piest's body and wrapped it in an orange rug. He put it in his Oldsmobile and drove to the river to dispose of his body.
In the meantime, police discover Gacy's earlier conviction for sodomy, so they search for evidence that could link him to Rob Piest's disappearance.
After our first search warrant, we found about 3 driver's licenses out of his bedroom that came back to young men who, when we did a little research, we found out that they were reported as missing persons, and some of them had worked for John Wayne Gacy. So that was pretty disturbing to us. We felt that there were probably at least 2 or 3 other homicides besides our victim.
Police find no signs of Rob Piest, but they do find a receipt that belongs to him. So they place Gacy on 24-hour surveillance.
Gacy managed to evade the first surveillance team when Dave Hackmeister and Mike Albrecht got the assignment to search for Rob Piest.
Early on, we determined that John Wayne Gacy had probably been involved in his disappearance. Although we didn't know Rob Piest personally, we grew to know him through the investigation. We all had photos of him. We felt like he was part of our family. When we first started off watching Gacy, we were hoping we were going to find Rob Piest with him the next day or so alive.
Police don't know that Gacy is responsible for murdering over 30 young men. But because they're determined to solve the Rob Piest case, they begin interviewing Gacy's associates.
Police also interrogates John Gacy's ex-wife.
His ex-wife Carol told them about a kid who used to work for him named John Bukovich, and how when he stopped coming around, Gacy told her that he'd run away from home.
Teenager John Bukovich will later be found dead under Gacy's garage. But until the discovery, police question as many of Gacy's employees as possible, including David Cram.
Did you ever...
of Gacy's named Michael Rossi tells police that a 17-year-old teen, Greg Godzik, disappeared about a week after he started working for Gacy.
David Cram and Michael Rossi, I always had the feelings that they at least knew of the murders. These kids were street smart. I don't know how they could not know that Gacy was doing some bad things.
During a search of Gacy's house, police discover a class ring belonging to a missing 19-year-old named John Zick. The evidence is piling up. Rob Piest has been missing for approximately 5 days, and detectives know that they can't let John Wayne Gacy out of their sight.
The John Wayne Gacy investigation was very unique. It was not a covert surveillance, it was an overt surveillance, meaning he knew we were the police, he knew we were following him.
The first time I met Gacy, we started a conversation. He was kind of a braggart at the time.
Hey.
Police keeps on following Gacy.
Without a warrant.
Told Mike on the radio, I said, Mike, we got a little bit of a drug transaction here.
What did John give you?
And we decided that we're not going to do anything about it right now. We'll put it in our back pocket and see what happens.
City Prosecutor Terry Sullivan gives the order to arrest Gacy for the drugs.
Guys, what are you doing? This is ridiculous. John Gacy, you are under arrest for marijuana. Come on. Oh, what did I do?
And this is one of the images I'm going to show you. The real cellar of horror where Gacy buried his victims. It's something really unwatchable.
Prosecuting attorney Robert Egan was one of the first on the scene.
The first body was excavated, and everyone was kind of standing around waiting for the excavation. There was a lot of water in the crawl space. As a matter of fact, the body had to be taken up literally out of water. The evidence technician had to reach down and feel a rib cage and then pull the rib cage up out of the water. The parts were put into a body bag, and as that was taking place, the evidence technician that was doing the excavation was feeling down under the water, and he yelled out to us, and everybody kind of turned around to see what he was worried. He said, I've got another rib cage down here.
Beneath the unassuming suburban home, detectives had made a discovery that would see it become one of the most infamous houses in American history.
Murder.
Gacy makes a full confession.
John's reaction to a murder charge, unbelievably, was pretty stoic.
Gacy confessed to killing kid after kid, but he always blamed the victim.
In all, Gacy admits to killing 33 young men and disposing of their bodies.
After he killed his victims, he would stick their underwear down their throat, and he actually buried 27 bodies in the crawl space below his house.
John Bukovich was under the cement in the garage, and Rob Piest, along with others, were dumped in the river.
And many times he said he killed two at a time. He would get two people incapacitated and kill one young man in front of the other one. And then he would kill the second person.
Why?
During the confession, he says there were times when I actually incapacitated the kids, and I was able to leave them alone because they couldn't move, and I would go and change into a clown outfit, which he deemed the bad clown. And it was a very disturbing looking clown, and he said he would torture the kids a little bit more, and then as dressed up as the bad clown, he would kill them.
The rope trick was that he would tie one little very loose knot around the neck. He'd have a stick, and then just on the other side of the stick he would tie another very loose knot, and the stick was long enough to go between the shoulder and the head of the victim, and he would just start twisting it to compress around the neck and basically strangle the victim. One of the statements he gave to me was that, you know, Mike, I'm not going to spend a day in jail for this. And he but he was going to use an insanity defense. Surprised me, he asked me about Gacy and his mental status. I don't think Gacy was crazy at all. He was just plain evil.
On December 22nd, 1978, John Wayne Gacy confesses to police that within the last 6 years, he has killed more than 30 young men and boys. The frigid Chicago winter weather can't keep the hordes of media outlets from staking out John Wayne Gacy's house. Every day brings new headlines and startling revelations.
you know, there was another body discovered, or another body is brought out, or 3 bodies were brought out, and every night they had a situation where they were doing the tallies.
Gacy draws a map of the crawl space where bodies can be found. The excavation only pauses when the ground becomes too frozen to dig.
We went through 200 sets of dental records. So it was a mass undertaking, and every week we would get another 3 or 4 or 5, and we'd have to go ahead and make a decision whether these were consistent and possible identifications.
On April 9th, 1979, a body is found floating in the Des Plaines River. It is positively identified as Rob Piest. Gacy pleads not guilty by reason of insanity to 33 counts of murder. Due to the media attention in the Chicagoland area, finding an impartial jury for Gacy's trial is a challenge. As a result, the jury is selected from the northern Illinois city of Rockford. 2 witnesses who testify against John Wayne Gacy are surviving victims Robert Donnelly and Jeffrey Rignall.
It was a brutal trial. Donnelly and Jeff Rignall both took the stand, and Rignall was so upset during his testimony that he vomited.
After only 2 hours of deliberation, the jury returns with a verdict: guilty on all counts. John Wayne Gacy is sentenced to death.
The trial was so emotional that everyone was crying at the end. The judge, the jurors, everyone but John Wayne Gacy.
I never hated Gacy, but I sure wanted him to get the death penalty. If he didn't get the death penalty, then nobody should get it.
Gacy continues to garner media attention while incarcerated.
In prison, Gacy began to paint, and this morbid market for his paintings began.
Gacy's execution, scheduled on May 10th, 1994, draws crowds. Inside the prison, John Wayne Gacy eats his last meal of Kentucky Fried Chicken and is then escorted to the death chamber. Gacy is then executed via lethal injection.
Gacy's final words were "kiss my ass."
One of the mother.
Look at this other horrific photo. This was the cellar of Gacy. Look, all the ditches, you see, all these holes were day by day digged by the police, and every day and night they took away so many corpses of young boys, one by one, you see. And these were other ditches to dig and to find other corpses. But look at the number 1, 8, 12. These numbers were all the numbers of young guys with names, surnames, and their families. Didn't know that they had been brutally murdered and buried in a so horrifying way. Look, he buried them with concrete and cement. It's really something more than horrifying, something really.
In prison for sex crimes was let out. Today they found the bodies of at least 3 young boys buried under his house. He is charged with murder.
Police have been watching John Gacy's suburban Chicago home for the past 10 days.
This is Extreme Real Horror. Watch.
Several more bodies buried here. It's suspected because of the looks of the area down in the crawl space. There are some other mounds, and it appears to be more there.
Look, this real skeleton of one of the victims, a young boy. Look, this is a real skeleton found in that cellar of real extreme horror. And this was the skeleton of a young boy. Other corpses had been found in decomposition. This was already skeleton. Look. This was a young guy. He had all the life in front of him. Really horrifying death.
Charged with murdering Robert Piest. And after hearing the remains of more bodies were found at Gacy's house, Judge Marvin Peters ordered him held without bond. At the hearing...
December day, the first of his victims were found in the crawl space beneath his home. They were taken out one by one as the world watched. For
2 years before being executed via lethal injection because condemned to death penalty, this is John Wayne Gacy, who starts to fear death. So, even if so guilty, he tries to cheat and states to be innocent. Watch this.
And the honesty of it, if they want to be convinced or brainwashed into what they believe, then fine, then go ahead and kill me. But vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, because you will have executed somebody that didn't commit the crime.
Those are the words of John Wayne Gacy, pleading innocence from death row at Menard State Penitentiary 13 years after being convicted of his crimes. The most notorious serial killer of our time.
When they paint the image that I was this monster who picked up like these altar boys along the street and swatted them like flies, I said, this is ludicrous.
But the jury didn't find it ludicrous. After barely 2 hours deliberation, its verdict was murder by Gacy, 33 times. 29 bodies buried in that house of his on Summerdale, a crime of horrendous proportions. In the crawl space underneath, bodies covered with lime and encased in plastic, dug up a few days before Christmas and carried into the December cold, one after another after another. But despite all this evidence, he says he has proof he didn't do it. Here's one of
33 kids, and you say you didn't believe in hitting. I mean,
well, anybody that knows, you see, first of all, you're basing this garbage on what you've heard of me,
and what the jury said, and what the courts of appeal have said. And the prosecutor who put him in jail says Gacy is a ruthless and sadistic killing machine.
He's responsible. He knew exactly what he was doing. He planned it in advance, and he carried it out, and he enjoyed it.
And he admitted it. In fact, boasted of it to the police. But now, 14 years later, he's denying it and talking to me about it. What does Prosecutor Kunkel think of that?
He's a desperate man. He's going to die in 2 or 3 years. He's going to be executed.
But even if when he claims to be innocent, when he was guilty 1,000%, even giving these interviews, he does a mistake. Listen carefully.
Carefully, you catch him slipping up. About John Bukovic, for instance, his second victim. What happened to what happened in the Bukovic case? Where was he picked up, and how did he get to the house, and what happened with him?
I don't want to go into the other, the 5 that I know about. Just take it that I did.
33 young men and boys that we know of. count is suspected to be higher, much higher. And not just that he killed them, he buried most of them in his cellar. In his cellar. Some of them out on the property. But these were innocent people. They just vanished and died in the most horrific way. He would torture them, handcuff them, and keep them alive for a long time while raping them before finally murdering them. And
this is the content of these secret tapes that have been released by the son of Gacy's attorney. Now I read you the content. Sam said, "I could have killed 100 people. How do I know I didn't kill 100 people? How did I know I didn't while I was traveling? It's possible, but I don't recall it." How the hell can you feel about something that you don't do? How can I have any feelings about that? Once they were in the ground, they weren't my problem. These statements are really horrific. Arguing back and forth, I talk him into putting the handcuffs on. Once he got the handcuffs on, I pinned him down and I told him, I said, "You might as well settle down and get it straight for once and for all, because I'm not going to give you a check." This is Gacy talking about one of his victims. Really horrific. Now the next one. I said, "I don't give a shit what the hell you do." And then he said, "Let me up, let me up." I said, "I'm letting you up until get done explaining it." I said, "God damn, well, you owe me for the carpeting. You are not getting your money until I get mine." And then he told me that if I didn't let him up, or if I would let him up, he'd kill me. He threatened to kill me. This is his thin justification of one of his murders. I'm assuming from that point forward, I don't remember if I killed him or if I just left him on the floor. I do know that he was dead around 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning when I came out of my room. And now Gacy tells his attorney how he murdered his first victim. Gacy, "I took the knife. I think I stabbed him in the chest 4 or 5 times. Right after I knocked him off balance. And his attorney, after you say knocked him off balance, you were holding his arm and he slashed your... Gacy, yeah, because he came down with a knife and I knocked him over. I fell on top of him. Then I could move his hand. And the attorney, this is after you wrestled him to the other bedroom. Yes. Then he fell down and you were on top of him. You have clothes on then, Gacy. Did I have clothes on? Yeah. Gacy, I think just underwear. Did he have clothes on? Gacy, yeah. I think he had his levies on. Just his pants. No shirt, no shoes, or socks. So he wasn't dressed to leave. Gacy, no, I think he was saying that he was sorry. I'm sorry. He didn't mean to. That he wasn't going to hurt me. I don't know. Bob Motta, the attorney, you stabbed him 4 or 5 times? Gacy, yeah. Did he appear to die immediately, or was he still alive? Was he breathing, or did he appear to be lifeless after the stabbing? Gacy. No, I think after the first or second stabbing, all you could hear was the gargling of blood in his lungs. The attorney, do you remember covering up Zeke's body with dirt? Do you remember the actual act? Gacy, no, I know I threw him down the basement. Now, sir, you remember throwing dirt on him? You remember? Gacy, no. Was there every lime put over him? You remember pouring lime? Gacy. No. Gacy. I would think that Rossi had dug down there before Rossi had dug down there before Zeke died. And so the attorney, for the purpose of trial, and now Gacy, yeah, I don't know who came up with that idea that it was tile, because I don't know if it came out in conversation or if it was because of my uncle asking what we were digging for down there. These contents are really, really horrifying. Sir, you think it's possible that the digging was simply to bury people? Yeah, I would, sure. It's possible. Sir, how did you feel the next morning when you woke up and you found Godzik dead? What was your initial emotional response? Gacy, just to throw him down the crawl space, get rid of him. He's speaking like throwing away garbage. This is really horrifying and creepy. No conscience. Sir, did you question yourself as to why it was done? Gacy, nope. See, but once you bury somebody, it was already gone. There was no feeling, Bob. In fact, for the most part, even like today, I don't believe I killed anybody, but yet I know I did. And now you can watch and hear again John Wayne Gacy and is chilling words. Watch and listen.
Relaxation for me. You regressed into childhood, you were able to relax, and you could be goofy if you wanted to, and still you had the facade of your face being covered.
The clown suit hid his face and his evil crimes as well. Even today, on death row, he's painting portraits of himself as a clown. The 33 Flavors clown, and the convicted killer of 33 can't help but chuckle at the irony.
I used to do clowning, and I don't know if you want to mention the name, for an ice cream company in Chicago who had 33 flavors. I'm serious, Bressler Ice Cream Company. I was their contractor and I was also their clown. And Pogo the Clown was the clowning that I did for charity hospital work for the Democratic Party and that. And Pogo the Clown is originally. Pogo comes from being Polish and on the go all the time, so it's Pogo.
On the go for Democrats as Norwood Park committeeman. A visit with Rosalind Carter, the First Lady during the Carter administration. Gacy right here is hiding the fact that there are bodies buried under his house. He's the great deceiver.
I always felt that service community and community service to others, you know, in my religious background, I felt if you serve other people, it'll come back to serve you. You know, I've always believed that way with generosity.
So if he looks for good and he's generous, why'd he kill 33 people? Nobody knows, but the psychiatrists talk about how obsessive and meticulous he is, enough to kill repeatedly and to stack his victims in a careful and ordered manner. like cordwood under his house. Even now, he's obsessed and meticulous with his life.
What's your life like? Day to day? I live it day to day.
What do you mean?
If you want to know what my life is like, I log it every day. For the last 12 years, all you got to do is ask. I can tell you everything. I can tell you it's the first meal they serve me here because I do it daily.
What do you do all day?
Every phone call, everything that I do, every time an officer's around me is logged. Every movement that I make is in the book here.
And he and his lawyers have a log on his victims, too. Everything they did before they were killed.
You know, when I tell you I've got background information on it, we took each one of them by, we took each one of the victims, and this is by their names or by their indictment numbers. And what we did with each one of them, we did profile sheets on them.
Look.
In his paintings, why the skeleton?
This was done by request. Somebody requested a skull clown, and mostly the punk rockers and the undergrounders like that stuff there. This is Christ, as I see him in myself. And it's monolithic.
Oh my gosh.
To me, it's monolithic. He's all things to all people. This here is the Hi-Ho series, and that is self-explanatory. It's the Seven Dwarfs. Misconception of what the house on Summerdale is. It's not a house where you work 9 to 5 and come home and it's like a house where you live in. The living room was the private office section. One of the bedrooms was a terrarium. The kitchen was more like a fast food kitchen.
He's painting a picture of a busy place, but conveniently omitting the crawl space, which he divided into plots like a cemetery, numbers 1 through 26, 6 feet by about 3 feet, and 1.5 feet deep. That was under the house. Up above 8213 West Summerdale was so high on drugs, he didn't know what he was doing.
No, I started back in 1984. I started taking 10 milligram of Valium, and by the time 1978 came around, I was doing 130 milligram of Valium. But then I was moving 80 jobs a year, and I was working 16 to 18-hour days, and I just had to have something to take the pressure off.
So the next thing people wonder is what about the smell in the house of decomposing bodies? Gacy has a lasso opso story for that.
When I was arrested, they claimed, well, there was this putrefied odor in the house. And I contend that was a lot of hogwash, too, because one officer, Schultz, claims on the 18th or on the 19th that as he came into the house, we had come into the house, and my little lasso opso was in the house. And, of course, he had been locked in the kitchen, you know, all day. Well, the little puppy, he piddles, see, and while he's piddling and while he is doing his business on the paper and that, you can imagine what it smells like if you go into a closed room. And when the heat came on, as soon as the heat came on, it'd give you, you know, that strong feces odor.
Or if not the dog, maybe just the house itself. How about the sump pump?
You know, I found it as odd when we bought the house that a house with a crawl space would need a sump pump. But then I learned the first time it rained that this ground gets wet under there, and then the crawl space actually floods up to 1 foot deep in water. And then as it recedes, it puts out a musty odor. There was always a musty odor in that house.
These excuses, and the ones we've heard all week, are the bases for Gacy's appeals, which are expected to go on for another 2 years, maybe 3, before his death sentence is carried out. What have 13 years of thinking about?
If you look at him, you see a very friendly person, a calm person. Instead, he was pure evil.